I want to do this little bit of a review video for you. It's some examples of equations and inequalities and percentages and everything like that. So let's take a look at this first one. This 2x plus 6 equals 20. Now remember, our goal is to get x by itself. So the first thing we want to do, subtract 6, subtract 6. So we always take care of the addition and subtraction first. That cancels out, and I have this 2x equals 14. So now, to split up the 2 and the x, to cancel this multiplication of the 2 and the x, I want to divide by 2, divide by 2. This becomes 1, so I'm just left with x equals 7. Now remember, you can always check yourself, and I could check myself by plugging 7 back in for x, and I get 2 times 7, which is 14, plus 6, does that equal 20, and 20 equals 20, so I know that it works. Okay, let's try another one. Now let's take this one. Now notice that there's nothing I can combine in here. My next step is going to be to distribute. So I'm going to take 4 times t to get 4t, plus 4 times 15 to get 60 equals 20. And then I proceed just like I did before. I subtract 60 on both sides, and that gives me, this cancels out, and I get a 4t equals negative 40. Then I divide by 4 on both sides, and I find t to equal negative 10. And again, a negative divided by a positive, that will give me a negative. All right, another one. In this one, again, I'm going to have to distribute because there's nothing I can combine in here. And you know what? You might want to pause this video and see if you can figure it out yourself, and then go back through it to see that if it matches up with what I'm doing. So if you want to pause it, go ahead and do it, and then press play. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and distribute that up. So I have a 1 minus 12 plus 6h. Now remember, that's a negative 6 times a positive 2 to give me that negative 12. And a negative 6 times a negative h to get a plus 6h, and that equals 7. Now before I proceed, I want to combine like terms. So let's combine this to get a negative 11 plus 6h equals 7. I'm going to add 11 on both sides to get 6h equals 18. And then I divide both sides by 6 to get h equals 3. And again, I could plug that 3 back in for h and see that it gives me a true equation. All right, next one. In this one, we're saying the difference, which is a subtraction, of 14 and 3 times a number, but I don't know what that number is, which is x, is the same as the sum of this number, which I don't know what it is, so it's x, and negative 10. So let's put that together. The difference of 14 and 3 times the number. So that's going to be 14 minus 3x is the same as this number and negative 10. Now a quick little side note is that this right here is the same as saying x minus 10. So x plus a negative 10 is the same as if I said x minus 10. All right, let's proceed. I'm going to get all the x's to one side, all the non-x's to the other side. So subtract x, subtract x. That gives me 14 minus 4x equals, this cancels, and I get negative 10. Now I'm going to subtract 14 on both sides, and I get negative 4x equals negative 24. Next, I divide by negative 4, divide by negative 4. This cancels out, and I get x equals 6. And that's going to be my answer. So I know 14 minus 3 times 6 is the same as 6 plus a negative 10. And if you plugged it back in, you would see that this left side would be negative 4 equals the right side, which would also give you a negative 4. Okay, moving on. And this one, this percentage, there's two ways I could do this. I could do an is over of equals percent over 100. And if I did that, 120 is of what equals 15 over 100. Now I would then cross multiply, so that gives me 15x equals, and that's going to give me 12,000. And when I divide both sides by 15, I get x equals 800. Okay, so that's one way to do it. The other way to do it, and I'm going to do it in purple here, is to set it up like an equation, and just exactly how you're reading it. 120 is, so 120 is means equals 15% as a decimal is 0.15 of its multiplication, what number? So if I divided both sides by 0.15, divide by 0.15, you would see that x still equals 800. So two ways to do it are is over of equals percent over 100, or reading it like a book and just setting up the equation accordingly. Okay, two more to go. All right, in this one I want to solve for y, so that means I got to get this y all by itself. The first thing I'm going to do is move the entire quantity of 4x over. So to do that, I'm going to subtract 4x. Now note that I didn't divide by 4 because I'm not trying to split up the 4 and the x. I'm moving that whole clump of 4 and x. So I subtract that whole quantity of 4x. So this cancels out, and I end up with 3y equals negative 4x plus 12. Now I still got to get y by itself, but this time I want to split up the 3 and the y, so I'm going to do a division to split that up. And I get y equals negative 4/3 x plus 4. And that is what happens when I solve this for y. Now, this might look familiar now with our slope and our y-intercept form. But we'll come back to that. So, all right, next one. Finally, we have an inequality. And in this one, I solve this inequality as if this right here was an equal sign. So I'm going to subtract 5x on both sides, and I get a negative 3x minus 1 is less than or equal to 8. Now I'm going to add 1 on both sides. This cancels and I get negative 3x is less than or equal to 9. Finally, dividing by a negative 3, I'm going to see that x, and now I got to flip the sign. Because I divided by a negative right here, I should actually just put a little box around that. Because I divided by a negative on both sides, I got to flip that sign, and so now x is greater than or equal to, and 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3. So how does that look? As an interval, as an inequality, this is how it would look. Just that x is is greater than or equal to negative 3. On a number line, let's go ahead and put that up here. I have a negative 3, and it would be a bracket on negative 3, and I would be shading to the right because x is greater than or equal to negative 3. So it's a bracket because it's also that equal sign right here. And then if I were to put that in interval notation, it would look like bracket negative 3, comma, infinity, parentheses. And this is saying that x can be anything from negative 3 all the way to infinity, including negative 3. So it's important that understanding that that bracket is indicating that x could also be equal to negative 3. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this review of equations and that this makes a little bit more sense. Feel free to go through this video again, pause the video before I actually solve these equations or inequalities to see if you can figure it out.